Welcome, everybody, to the GNI Masterclass Tackling Misinformation. Hello to Laurent from France, who said hi in the comments. It's good to have you here. Thank you for joining. Hopefully more of you will start to stream in. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about tackling misinformation. My name is Mevan Babakar. I am the News and Information Credibility Lead working in the Google News Initiative. Hi, Michael from Athens. Welcome. It's good to have you here. So today, I'm going to be taking you through some of the research that we have around misinformation and some of the tools that are at your disposal and at the disposal of journalists around the world to help tackle it. We'll be taking questions as we go. So please feel free to put them in the comments and we'll tackle those at the end. But without further ado, let's get going. So the problem of misinformation is one that I'm sure you've all heard about. It's not a new thing. It's been around for quite some time. But understanding what to trust in the modern day is becoming harder and harder. We're bombarded with lots of different types of information, and trying to understand where we should place our trust wisely is something that isn't so easy anymore. And I think that as there is more and more information to sift through, we also need more and more tools at our disposal to help us place that trust in a meaningful way. So today, I'm going to talk you through some of those tools that exist that do that. We're going to be talking about the fact-check tools that are available on the Google site. We're going to be talking about something called About This Image and the context around images. And we'll touch lightly on SynthID as well and how we can identify AI-generated content. But before we dig into the actual tools, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the research that exists and about how people feel about misinformation that's already out there. So this is the portion of people who are concerned about what is real and what is fake on the internet when it comes to news. This is from the Reuters Institute. And as you can see, in Europe and across the world, misinformation and identifying what is true and what is fake is a big concern for a lot of people. In Africa, it's as high as 77%, and across Europe, it's around 53%. But the things that people are concerned about are slightly different. So this is the proportion that say they saw false or misleading information about this topic in the last week. This is only for the US, the UK, Slovakia, and Japan. But as you can see in different regions, people see different kinds of misinformation, or they feel like they see different kinds of misinformation. So in the US, when this was taken, in politics, lots of people in the US saw lots of political misinformation or leading misinformation. And in the UK, it was only 26% at the time. You can imagine with the election that might have changed. If you look at the topic of the war in Ukraine, in Slovakia, 45% of people saw false or misleading information about that in the last week. And so where you are regionally affects the kinds of misinformation that you might actually see. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a research project that the Google research team did that I think helps actually add some numbers into how big is the misinformation problem and how can we actually start to break it down in meaningful ways. So this is called Amoeba. It's an annotated misinformation media-based data set and paper. There's a lot to take in, but essentially it looked at all of the fact checks that were written by fact checkers across the world. So this is 130,000 fact checks, and extracted all of the pieces of misinformation that had been checked in the last upwards of 10 years, and looked at all of those pieces of misinformation and added onto that a whole bunch of extra annotations to try and understand where was this misinformation coming from, what are the kinds that we see the most, what are the types of manipulations that we see the most. And as far as I know, this is the only data set that has kind of gone into it and looked at in the wild misinformation at this level. So I want to share some of those learnings with you today and also show you how some of those learnings have turned into products and the way that we think about it. So This is a lot of data, but the summary is essentially, we looked at those 130,000 fact checks from around the world. And some of the things that we found were actually 80% of the misinformation analyzed used media in some form. In 2022, video became the most common modality used in misinformation claims and now accounts for about 60%. So images and video are the thing that fact checkers check the most, but as a proxy, we can see more and more misinformation having a media or video-based element to it, and that might actually be causing the most harm. And we also learned that generative AI content was largely absent from the corpus, from like the fact checks until 2023, really, where it started to dramatically increase. That makes a lot of sense. That's when a lot of Gen AI tools started to come out, and we expect that to keep increasing. But interestingly, one of the things that we also learned is that manipulation of the content itself, so the manipulation of the images, was not the biggest form of manipulation. It was actually when the context of the image was changed. That was the biggest type of manipulation that we saw. And I'll show that to you in some graphs. So as you can see, this is looking at all of the fact checks that were published. The red line is the media-based misinformation that we identified in those fact checks from fact checkers around the world. You can see it's considerably higher than the ones that were non-media based. We also looked at what are the tools that fact checkers actually use to identify and check media-based misinformation. And reverse image search was one of the most widely used tools around. So this is the other point that I was making about context versus content. So if you look at all of the media-based misinformation and you dig a bit more into it, and you try and understand actually what was the manipulation that was taking place, this darker gray line is the content manipulation. So this is when you take an image of somebody and you change their nose, or you add a coat, or you add an extra digit, whatever it is you're doing, you're changing the actual pixels of the image and you're changing the image itself. The red line up here is actually context manipulation. And context manipulation is when I take an image, I don't edit the image at all. I take the image and I just use it and say it's something different. So for example, it could be an image of my hometown in Iraq, and I can take that same image that was maybe published in 2002 and say, hey, look, this is actually a picture of Ukraine in 2023. And I haven't changed the image at all, but I have changed the context in which that image was used. And that is actually one of the largest manipulations that we see around images. Then we decided if we could go a bit deeper into that, like what are the types of context manipulation that we can actually identify? And after studying and looking at all of the ones that were context manipulations, the ones that were easiest to draw out and the most substantial to draw out were date and time, identity, and location. Those were the three main ways that context manipulation actually took place. So after learning a little bit about that paper and that data set is actually available publicly for anybody to read and for anybody to play with the data. And we can share that later with all of you. It's actually called the Amoeba data set, and you can Google it right now, and hopefully it will be near the top. But you can actually access that data and play with it yourself. And some of the learnings from that are kind of what have helped us understand what more we could be doing and building for the journalists and fact checkers around the world. So one of the tools that already exists is called the Factcheck Explorer. This is a place on the internet, I guess, called the Factcheck Explorer, where you can search all of the fact checks from around the world. It actually takes fact checks from all the fact checkers who are IFCN certified. So these are high quality fact checkers from around the world to the highest standards. And you can actually search by text for anything, any topic or any organization, and you will get a summary of the claim, you'll get a summary of the rating, and you'll get a link to the article. So for example, if you wanted to see fact checks that were recently written about Trump. You could put Trump in and it will show you everything from every fact checker across the world. So we recently learned that 80% of fact check misinformation uses images or video. So we've added the feature to be able to search by image as well into the Factcheck Explorer now. So now instead of just typing in Trump, you could even upload a specific picture of Trump, and it will show you if that image has featured in any fact check ever written. And that has proven to be quite a useful resource. So for example, we've used the Pope in a Puffer jacket here. If you upload the Pope in a Puffer jacket, you'll see all of the fact checkers who have written articles about it, and you'll get a summary of their rating and a link to their fact check. So one of the other things that we have built in that's currently in beta is this tab called Image Contexts. So as I was talking to you earlier about, it's not content manipulation, it's context manipulation. That's the most harmful and most ubiquitous. We are working on this beta that actually allows you to understand what the context of an image could be. So if you're a journalist or you're doing an investigation, you could potentially use this other tab called Image Context. And then it shows you something that looks like this, which doesn't look very pretty, I understand, but it's something that's still being developed right now. And I really want to share it with you all because I think it's quite exciting to see something that's still being built. So for example, in this image, it's actually a windmill that's being de-iced in Sweden. But this shows you a timeline of all of the times that image was actually surfaced across the internet. And it extracts all of the entities and the subjects on that page. So if that image first appeared in Sweden in 2015, you could go down this document and you'd see actually has the context of it changed. So you can see it changes from Sweden, and actually you start to see United States, you start to see Texas, you start to see other places pop up, you start to see Germany. And you then have the references, so you can actually go and do a deep dive into those references and see actually what happened with this image. So this isn't a tool that's for the general public. It's a tool specifically for people doing deeper investigations. And we have made this available to about 2,000 journalists and fact checkers around the world who are currently testing it. And if you'd like to be added to that beta, you can also get in touch and we can add you to that. But hopefully you can see how this links directly to the conversation about content versus context. We need to develop better ways of helping people understand what the context of an image is so that they can make quick decisions about where to place their trust. So all of the reason why the Factcheck Explorer works and why things like the image context tool works is because there's a markup called claim review schema. So claim review schema is essentially just almost like a recipe. It's like a piece of code that is embedded in an article of a fact check. And it helps us understand in a machine readable way, what is the claim, what is the conclusion, who is the author of the claim, what is the link to the fact check. And because the world's fact checkers publish their fact checks in claim review schema in an open way, then we can actually build on top of it and produce tools like these. And it also means that the product integrations that you see on search or on news or on YouTube, those are all fueled by things like claim review schema as well. So if you do a Google search at any point and there is a fact check written about something, the fact check actually looks a bit different to everything else. It actually has a claim separated out, a conclusion separate, and a link to the actual fact checker. So if you're interested in using claim review schema yourself, maybe you're a fact checker or maybe you're a fact checking desk at a newsroom, then there are 3 ways that you can use claim review schema. You can use the markup tool. This is a form that we host that you can just fill in and it adds it to the database that's open and public. Or that you could do your own CMS integration if you have developers who who can take that on, then you can add that in, add the form into your backend, and then everyone can fill that data in. It becomes publicly available. It also means it gets into the wider ecosystem of fact checks. And finally, if you're on WordPress, you can also use an open source plugin that has been made that very quickly adds the fields into the back end of your site. So you can actually add in these fields and this metadata every time you publish a fact check. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about this result and content advisories. So whereas the previous tools I mentioned were actually about helping journalists and fact checkers do more intensive investigations, the next set of tools are for everybody. And it's more about giving content and context to people who can actually determine to more people so that they can actually figure out for themselves how to place the trust they have. About this result is a way that people can understand more about the results that they're seeing on search. So if you put into Google a specific query and you're going to a specific source, you can now press the 3 buttons on the side, and it will actually tell you more information about that result. So it might tell you more about the source, and it might tell you about the source in its own words. So for example, here we get more information about the Mayo Clinic. Where was it based? Where does it come from? What is it? How was it founded? All of that stuff is a small snippet of it that's available there. But the idea of this feature is to encourage people to have more readily access to information literacy tools. So to quickly give them context on the source of any result and to actually help them be able to improve their own search skills, actually be able to be more critical about the things that they're seeing, and be able to actually understand where is that extra piece of context that I need to be able to decide if this is the right result for me. About this page kind of does a similar thing. So you can actually, it brings all of that stuff into one place and actually shows you more. It shows you what a page kind of says about itself in its own words. It might show you other references to that page as well, like across the internet, more web results about that page. It might also show you any top news that might be relevant or related to it as well. But again, the idea is to help you do a deep dive. If you're doing a deep dive on a source or a topic, it actually gives you just that extra bit of context that you might need to be able to decide, can I trust this? We also do quite a lot of content advisories and helpful notices when things are scarce, when information is scarce, or when actually the situation is changing very fast. So if something is changing rapidly, we'll actually say, it looks like these results are changing quite quickly. And we all know that in a changing context or changing environment, the facts change very fast too. So just because in one snapshot it says one thing doesn't mean that if you check back later, it might not say a completely different thing. So it's an opportunity for us to do a bit more information literacy at that point and tell people that actually, maybe you want to come back later when things are a bit more settled, or if you are going to consume this information now, be a bit critical about what you might be seeing because it might not have settled just yet. We'll also show advisories, content advisories, when we're not confident in the quality of the results, so that there might be data voids. There might be lots of good information on one topic, but actually on another there might not be much at all. And in those cases, we'll also tell you that you might not have many high quality results, or there might not be many relevant results. It is possible that you might have put in a query that doesn't generate many results, and if that is the case, we will tell you. All of those things actually are quite vital in helping people tackle misinformation. I understand they might feel a bit separate, but actually when it comes to misinformation, it's not just about taking off bad it's not just about removing bad information from the internet. It's also actually about giving people the tools to be able to decide who and what to trust and where to place their trust, and actually what context can we give them that actually helps them make that decision at a time when it's really vital. So another version of this that we're doing specifically for images is called About This Image, and also touching lightly on SynthID as well. So About This Image is giving you context in search about images specifically. So it will tell you things like when was that image first found, and when has that image appeared in news stories or across social media. It might also tell you how old that image is, or it might tell you if there's a fact check that was written in that image. So in order to access it, you need to press the 3 buttons on the side, and then press About This Image. And so there's a lot of like juicy, excellent context that's hidden away in these three dots. And I think there's more and more that will be coming to that will be quite exciting in terms of context and investigations. So SynthID is another extension of About This Image in some ways. So SynthID actually generates a digital watermark for AI generated images. So this is in the pixels of this side where it says watermarked. There's essentially a little trace that says to us that it's actually generated by AI. And that actually stays even though the image might be edited, made brighter or darker or changed in any way. We still actually know that there's a watermark in this image that means that it was AI generated. But specifically, we're talking about AI generated with Google AI. So not just all AI, but Google AI. And in the About This Image viewer, you will be able to actually see if something was made with Google AI, because it will show you first how old this image is, but then it will say down here if it was generated by AI that it was made with Google AI. And that will be true for all Google images that are generated by Google. And this image is one that you can look up right now. If you look at Google Deepmind, and it's called the mirror butterfly, I believe, or silver butterfly, then you can see that that comes up at the side when you press About This Image. So that is a whistle-stop tour into some of the tools that we have available to help you fact check if you wanted to search the world's fact checks about this image and about this result, to kind of give you more context for your own investigations, or to help you actually decide where to place trust, and around SynthID for watermarking and identifying AI-generated content. And I think that all of these areas will start to grow a bit more as well over the years. And actually, there'll be more features being built into these things to help people give them more context and to give them more tools that empower you to be able to understand what is real and what is not. And I think that's a really important part of making the internet work for everybody. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining me. If you have any questions, I would love to hear them. We'll give you a few minutes to write those out. But if there aren't any, then it's been a pleasure. Thank you all very much for joining me. And I hope you have an excellent day. Bye.